Well, upon arrival in Venice at midday, of course, we're kind of hungry and ready for lunch. And there's this lovely and friendly restaurant right on the Grand Canal, Povoledo. It's just a block or two from our hotel, so this was really convenient. And we had a fun chat with the waiter, who's a local Venetian guy. And get ready for some polenta, Venetian style, and squid with that black ink, or pasta, fettuccine, spaghetti. Any kind of pasta you want here. They have some nice fresh pasta with tomato sauce. You can get it with peas and ham, local style. This is a nice way to start our visit in Venice, build up some energy. Then we leave our hotel, heading out from the Abbazia for our afternoon walk with Daniela, and right away we run into some street musicians. Very often in Europe, you're going to find buskers on the street performing. These fellows seem to be from Central Europe with kind of gypsy music. As we make our way out from the hotel, which is right by the train station and the train station bridge, one of the three major bridges across the Grand Canal, we are heading into the heart of Venice on this walking tour with Daniela. You see our Hawaii group over this substantial bridge. You get some very nice views looking up and down the Grand Canal in both directions. Often there's some street peddlers here selling cheap handbags or little games and puzzles. But today we're just walking along, passing on by up and over the bridge to the other side. Now we're in the central section of Venice. And ultimately, we'll be heading to Piazza San Marco, but we're going to take our time getting there. We're going to take you on a back route that's not often walked by tourists. It's a lovely and enchanting route through these narrow alleyways, passing little shops and restaurants here and there, the old decaying and crumbling buildings, a little bit of graffiti here and there, beautiful brick structures. It's so pleasant to be able to stroll everywhere and not worry about cars or trucks running you over or blasting you with noise and exhaust. The only wheeled vehicles in Venice are the push carts for the workers and the little bicycles for the kids. Instead, Venice offers the peace and serenity in a world of its own if you know where to look. However, the main square, the Piazza San Marco, and primary shopping streets can be an ordeal of crowds and high-priced shops that could give you a very bad impression, especially if you're only in town for a day like most visitors, or even part of a day like most bus tourists. Venice has the highest ratio of tourists to residents of any city in the world, which proves what a highly prized magnet this is, but warns you the town is being loved to death. You're going to face a major challenge to get away from the mobs, but it can be done if you know where to go, as we will show you. Most tourists who visit Venice are here for just a few hours and completely miss out on the authentic experience because they are in a rush to get back to their tour bus. All they see on a brief day trip is the Piazza San Marco, which is a beautiful spot. They might go to a glass factory, maybe a quick gondola ride, and then they rush off to the next city on their hurried itinerary. They supposedly saw Venice, but missed the heart and soul of the town. Well, this is the paradox of mass tourism. More people are traveling to more crowded places, but are in such a hurry they don't find what they came looking for. This problem is more apparent in Venice than anywhere else. Rush, rush, rush. The rewards of seeing the real town are so great that so many people want to come here, but they're in such a rush on a package tour, they don't really see it. Most places that you visit in your travels are worth more than a brief encounter. especially a destination as wonderful as Venice. Our approach here is totally different. We've got many tips for getting the most out of every hour in this precious jewel of a city. You could easily fill 3 days exploring this town, but even if you have only 2 days, you could squeeze in most of our suggestions. This detailed itinerary will take you far beyond the stage front of Piazza San Marco to discover Venice's true character, much of which is found in the little back alleys. The schedule that will bring you to all the major highlights, plus gets you into the quiet neighborhoods far from the crowds where you will find colorful local life. The best way to see Venice is by getting away from the tourists and walking through those little alleys. Oh, don't worry about getting lost. You will get lost, but that's half the fun. You cannot stray too far because this is a small town. It's only about 1 mile wide, and it's on an island, so you can't go beyond that. So just absorb the overwhelming beauty and enjoy yourself. Wander on these little side lanes, and here we're in a little courtyard surrounded by the old apartment-type buildings. Daniela's pointing out this well in the middle of a courtyard. This is very typical because Venice does not have any groundwater as such, so in the old days, the roofs and the ground would catch the water and it would percolate down into holding tanks, and they would get it from those wells. This is a very old-fashioned floor, that herringbone brick pattern. As we continue our little walk, distances are not very far in Venice. You really can walk from one end of town to the other in a couple of hours, depending on how lost you might get. And following Daniela, we are not going to get lost at all. She was born and raised here and knows the town very well. We've just walked by the school that she went to as a child.
We are out of the beaten track, so then when we reach Rialto, San Marco, you'll see a lot of crowd.
And here's some local kids playing soccer, of course, the national sport of Italy and throughout Europe. They don't have any soccer fields as such in Venice. They don't have any fields at all. It's only these courtyards. In fact, they call them campi, which means field. So back in the old days, there probably was grass here, dirt, but of course that's long gone. Venice is a very urban place, a fairly high-density population, although in the last century, of course, the population has dwindled considerably from what it once had been. They estimate today there's about 70,000 people living in Venice, whereas there might have been 240,000 a few hundred years ago when Venice was at its peak. Walking along past the Frari Church, we'll pop in there for a quick look later on in our visit. But for now, we're just walking by, continuing on our pursuit of the back streets of the town. Really getting away from the crowds here. It is totally empty, except for us, our Hawaii group. We had a small group on this trip, just 15 of us traveling together. A most enjoyable group of folks, most compatible, really a lot of fun sharing the experiences with each other and with our great guide Daniela. As we trundle along, we'll be heading into some other little courtyards and visiting a spectacular staircase coming up shortly. Passing in the newsstands and cafes, there's all sorts of little nooks and crannies here. Notice those boards on the right side of the alley. Those are for when Venice floods a little bit. They put out the walking planks. But in the summertime and even in the spring and fall, there's not much flooding going on. But it is a city of water, of course. As we approach the Grand Canal, there's a traghetto. You see the sign, Traghetto San Tomà, that will take us across the canal from one side to the other. Now, with the 3 bridges, sometimes you'd have to walk quite a distance to get to a major bridge to cross the canal. Like here, you can't see any bridge in sight. And so the way you do it is you take a little boat across from one side of the canal to the other called the traghetto. And it's quite inexpensive, less than $1 for your short ride. You're not going to get seasick out here on the Grand Canal. And it's calm. You don't have to worry about the boat rocking. Although it is a little bumpier than the side canals. This is a traghetto gondola, so it's really the cheapest gondola ride you could imagine. And it's quick, and we're rapidly on our way, continuing the walk as we approach into the San Marco area, but we still have a ways to go yet before we get to Piazza San Marco. Around the bend, up the steps, crossing little bridges as we go. There are over 400 little bridges in Venice across those many canals, which form over 100 small islands. There are so many neighborhoods in this town. It's really quite something. With all those local folks living here, there is really a lot of character as you walk along from one spot to the next. We're approaching now a little staircase. It's called the Scala Contarini del Povoledo, which we call the Snail Staircase. Down this very narrow alley, and you get to a small courtyard. Here too there's a well in the middle, and in fact in the garden they've got several wellheads on display. As we get to the Snail Staircase, now this is a public type museum. You can pay to go in there if you wish and walk up the stairs. Up to the top you get a nice view and walk back down again, but we're just taking a look from the outside. It's a spiral staircase, goes around and around. This is something that was added to the palace. It was a private palace, like most of the big houses here. The staircase was added on after the building was constructed, maybe 100 years later. This was tacked on. And what does it do? Well, it provides a little outdoor ambience for the people who live there. They've got patios now, they've got lanais. And also it clears up some internal space. They don't have to have staircases inside the building, and they can utilize spaces always at such a premium in Venice. And that way they maximize their space. And it's beautiful too. This is a Renaissance feature. And in the courtyard, notice a pretty garden. And what do we have in the courtyard? Wells, a whole bunch of wells. So it's a display of wells that were brought from other parts of town. As you see here, there's still a well, a beautiful flower pot well. Beautiful spot. And we soon exit that same narrow, look at how narrow these alleys are. Turning left and then a quick right to nearby Campo San Luca, where 7 little alleys converge, bringing a constant stream of locals through this pleasant meeting spot.
This is another beautiful Campo, Campo San Luca.
Locals are always bumping into each other here and stopping and talking. And often you'll see conversations going on with lost tourists too.
The mother are talking, the kids, they don't mind what they are doing.
This is one of my favorite little spots. It's kind of a nothing place. It's not a landmark by any means, but it's a great spot. Just stand a moment and look around you. Campo San Luca. It's this intersection. It's like we're standing in the middle of a cloverleaf on a highway. How many roads come together here? It's like 6 or 7 little lanes all come together. Locals hanging out, talking, cafes. This is a very local place. I'd say 80% of the people walking through at this hour are locals, going to work, chatting with their friends, going for coffee. Campo San Luca, just a lovely spot. Now this is the kind of place where you'll benefit by just stopping for several minutes and observing the scene, appreciating the murmur and flow of people passing through. And then of course there's tourist shops around it as well, and you'll find tourists wandering, getting lost, wondering where they are, looking for the Rialto.
Okay, let's go to see Rialto.
Passing some more of the upscale shops here. Nice hotels. We're getting more and more closer into the center of town, heading towards the Rialto Bridge, and then the Merceria, which is the main shopping district of Venice. We supply some maps with our walking routes on there, so those who are interested can try and follow along on the map, but it's a real challenge in Venice to use a map. Here on the Grand Canal, we have lovely views looking in both directions, along the banks of the Grand Canal to the Grand Rialto Bridge. That is one of the main focal points of the city, one of the main landmarks. You'll see signs all over town pointing your way to the Rialto, and there's many of these souvenir stands nearby. Pick up your Venetian masks, postcards, t-shirts, anything that says Venice or Venezia on it, and a good variety on things like t-shirts. That's one of the most popular items. And now we're in the Mercerie. This is the heart of the shopping district of the city. These stores are open all day and on into the evening. They don't take a break for afternoon lunch here. A whole variety of goods, a lot of them expensive, but very high quality merchandise on display. As we continue walking on our walking tours, we're not doing any shopping as such, but window shopping certainly. Having a look as we go. And in just a few blocks, we'll be in the main Piazza San Marco. Now, the Mercerie is a neighborhood of about 3 major parallel streets and half a dozen cross streets running perpendicular. So it really is quite the shopping district. Of course, all of Venice has shops scattered around, but this is the main cluster at the Mercerie. Take a break for some expensive ice cream near the piazza, and now we've arrived at the Basilica. The Basilica San Marco is the greatest single landmark of Venice, consecrated in the year 1094, which makes it one of the oldest functioning buildings in Europe. This church is Europe's most authentic surviving example of the Byzantine style, with 5 domes hovering over a Greek cross floor plan and an interior covered by the world's largest collection of mosaics. The basilica's design is based on the plan of a 6th century church in Constantinople that was built by the Emperor Justinian. The most important place in town is the Piazza San Marco, the city's largest public plaza,